afternoon, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison's virtual meeting. I'm Teresa Holmes, Club President. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today's meeting is sponsored by Mary Ellen O'Brien and Mary O'Brien, the O'Brien-Mary O'Brien Show. I love it. On behalf of DAIS, and our thanks to them both for support of today's luncheon. Let's start with opening music. Elaine Michler, whose birthday was yesterday, will play My Country, 'Tis of Thee on the piano. Following our patriotic song, we will listen to the song We Shall Overcome, performed by members of our music committee.
Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe
evident that all men are created equal.
Muy bien.
What a great performance. Thank you, Rotarians. I wanted to bring some awareness to members about a few important items as they relate to the continuing pandemic. First, I wanted to let you know that we will be holding the rest of our Wednesday meetings in January virtually. Yes, Rotarians, I miss you in the room too. We look forward, though, to being back together at the Park Hotel, hopefully starting February 2nd. I also wanted members to know that our board made the difficult decision to cancel our February 4th Rotary Ethics Symposium. There's a lot of work from volunteers that go into that event, and with the current COVID surge expected to peak during or near the end of the month, we felt it best to cancel this year's event. Our thanks to Mike Gotzler, his planning committee, and everyone involved as they focused on planning efforts for the Rotary Ethics Symposium in February of 2023. Our community grants campaign update. I wanted to give everyone a quick update on where we stand with community grants. To date, we have raised $134,787.11 towards our $150,000 goal, with 73% of our membership participating. Thank you for every one of you who has donated and your contributions that are coming. Did you know that we have having provided a few overviews of our campaign totals, I thought I'd make it best to mention to members that we have some background that I'd like to share on our annual community grants campaign and its historical giving. A few facts about the participation levels given by our members historically. First, our highest participation rate was in 2020 when Herman Bauman chaired the campaign. That's when we had 97.5% of members participating. The average participation rate of members giving to that campaign, the annual campaign at that time, over the 22 years in the prior pandemic or prior to the pandemic was 88%. Wow. Since the pandemic, when we started the campaign in 2021, member participation has dropped. But our community needs us more than ever during this pandemic, and you still have 2 weeks to make a gift towards this year's campaign. So please help us as best you can. Just a few quick historical figures about the amount raised during the annual campaign. Last year, we exceeded our fundraising goal by $24,000. The average gift per member has generally been over $300 in the past 7 years. But really, the amount that you give isn't as important as the fact that you made a gift. We've been able to raise over $150,000 a year for the past 6 years prior to the pandemic. So this year's goal is achievable, Rotarians. Our community grants campaign chair, Jason Ilstrup, and his team will be contacting members, and we will hear an update from them regarding next week's report. It's not been that long, just a year ago, that our board approved several task force committee recommendations: membership recruitment, retention and engagement, and another one which pertains to our club's governance. Our club's strategic plan for 2021 through 2023 involves 2 specific goals with several strategies that we have built into the plan. Goal 1, strengthen our community. Take action to unite all of us to create lasting change locally and across the globe. This goal contains strategies which focus on community, youth, goodwill, and peace. Goal number 2, encourage member engagement. Connect, grow, and serve through local activities, fellowships, and service projects to make our club even stronger. The goal contains strategies which focus on building friendships a fun and fulfilling member experience, which is my favorite, club experience, and a commitment to club equity and diversity. Our committees are organized under 5 teams which execute these goals, and governance mostly involves the changes that have been made to our committee structure. We've started the implementation of those changes in July, so I've scheduled several brief reports at upcoming meetings to keep everyone informed. In the coming weeks, you will hear about planned updates to philanthropy, scholarship, community grants and community projects, member engagement, and other areas of Rotary service. Have you considered the vast amount of connecting, growing, and service our club is committed to? We are living in challenging times for our own individual lives and for our community, yet Rotarians have stories reflecting resilience and steadfastness that you have not yet heard. Did you know that in 2020, when the pandemic initially surfaced, Rotarian Martha Sullivan and our own office staff member, Jane Costner, initiated efforts to make cloth face masks? Caring committee members Cheryl DeMars and Donna Beesman provided personal care to Rotarians Tom Lucas and Don Helfricht. Cheryl assisted Tom with improving his internet skills so he could subscribe and attend our virtual meetings. Donna went deeper and for weeks held the phone up to Don's computer so he could listen to the weekly meetings. Last year, Jason Behrens created DVDs for Nelson Cummings so he could view the meeting since he didn't use the internet. Rotarians moved into action with a creative idea to apply for matching grants to our club's Opportunity Grant, which resulted in $8,000 to the Second Harvest Food Bank. And lastly, the quick and committed pivot to virtual planning of meetings guaranteed our scholarship committee was able to deliver the annual Youth and Scholarship Awards. We are challenged, yet overcoming, and I hope that over the next few weeks, you will see your lane of service above self, locally or globally, that our Rotary Club is still committed to. We have birthdays to celebrate with a bit of humor or wisdom that complements our Rotary mission. We also encourage members to make an age-appropriate gift to the Madison Rotary Foundation, rounded up to $100 for our club's Synergy Scholarship Fund. January 10th, Sharon Alden, who shares a quote from journalist Mignon McLaughlin. Hope is the feeling we have, especially during a pandemic, that an alternate feeling we have is not permanent. January 11th, Elaine Mishler. January 11th, Greg Tipple. January 12th, Suresh Chandra. January 12th, Carol Colby, who says, it's weird being the same age as old people, but to paraphrase my role model, Betty White, I intend to grow into old age, she says, joyously and with continued passion. Way to go, Carol. As Betty said, if you live without passion, you can go through life without leaving any footprints. That's wisdom. January 13th, Mary Wright. January 15th, past President Larry Smith. Thanks to all our celebrants for their contributions to the Madison Rotary Foundation. Casey Okers will now play Happy Birthday on the flute. We have members in the news today. Laura Gallagher was quoted in an article titled, Governor's Business Plan Contest Offers Contestants More Than Prizes, Watertown Daily Times, on January 4th. Christy Goforth was pictured and quoted in an article titled Women to Watch 10 Years Later, Brava on January Magazine 22. Congratulations to George Hidalgo and West East Town Honda in celebrating their 10th anniversary in Business Magazine, January. In addition, they will be hosting a community blood drive on Friday, January 21st from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. Wendy Melendez was pictured and quoted in an article titled Amigo Construction in Cambridge, host visit from Governor Evers, hdngnews.com. Kyle Nandorf was quoted in an article titled Full Hospital Beds, Profound Fatigue. Local hospitals are receiving COVID patients from across Wisconsin, the Cap Times, on January 5th. And Maggie Porter-Kretz was interviewed on Fox 47 News, Back to School. The path to college is sometimes filled with detours, January 6th. Congratulations to those members in the news. We hold our monthly board meeting every first Monday of the month, but last week, it was last Wednesday. I encourage our members to review our board minutes that we post in the members login tab of our club's website. We want members to see our current board members, so we ask one board member to introduce a speaker each month. This month, Herman Bauman, who is in his first of a 2-year term on our board, will make the introduction. Herman joined our Rotary Club in 2013, and he is retired from a marketing and sponsorship company he founded. His wife, Kay Schwitzenberg, is also a member of our Rotary Club. I will now introduce Herman Bauman.
Thank you, President Teresa. Our speaker today is Shannon Berry, who became Executive Director of Domestic Abuse Intervention Services in 2007. The organization goes by its acronym DAIS, which is pronounced DAIS. Shannon has worked as a professional in the field of violence prevention and intervention for more than 25 years. She began her career in the Seattle area, where she worked in a group home for adolescents. Shannon has been recognized by In Business magazine as one of the 25 most influential people in Dane County, as well as in their Women of Industry edition. She also has received the Distinguished Social Worker Award for South Central Wisconsin, which was awarded by the National Association of Social Workers. Today, Shannon will talk to us about DAIS' efforts to meet the growing needs of victims and survivors of domestic violence during the pandemic, and how some of those service adaptations will continue in a post-pandemic world. We look forward to your presentation, Shannon, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks for speaking to us today. So out there in the audience, if you want to ask Shannon a question, please use the chat function in YouTube. President Teresa will be monitoring the chat and will select questions to ask our speaker at the end of her presentation. So let's welcome Shannon Berry to our dais.
Thank you so much, Herman. That was very nice. It's always really embarrassing to hear people talk about you. So hello, everybody. It's really an honor to be here with Downtown Rotary today. I particularly wanted to thank Mary Beth O'Brien and Mary Kay O'Brien for their sponsorship today. So on behalf of all of us at DAIS, we really, really appreciate the opportunity. So DAIS, who we are. Oh, where's the clicker? I lost the clicker. Oh, yes, there we go. Technical difficulties created by your guest speaker. So DAIS has been serving the Dane County community for 45 years. We were launched in 1977 and initially was a group of 5 volunteers working out of a church basement. And now we have 50 plus employees, over 200 volunteers during non-COVID times, and we serve as the primary domestic violence organization for the county. We serve those who are victims of intimate partner violence. So obviously domestic violence can include other forms of violence, but our focus area is really on victims of intimate partner violence, and you'll see the definition there. Unfortunately, domestic violence, intimate partner violence is incredibly pervasive. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience physical or sexual assault at the hands of an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime. So the reality is that every single person, every one of us knows somebody who has been or will be impacted by this issue. They just may not have disclosed to us. We also, DAIS, our primary service area geographically is Dane County, Wisconsin. We certainly do serve clients from other parts of the country, other parts of the state, but this is our primary service area. So, as you all know, Dane County is the second largest county population-wise in Wisconsin, and we have the second largest city in Wisconsin. It's a mix of urban and rural, and certainly a wide variety of diversity in terms of race and ethnicity. But when you take the statistics that I shared with you earlier, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men, that means almost 70,000 women and girls in Dane County will experience or have experienced domestic violence in their lifetime. And that 1 in 7 means more than 38,000 men and boys in Dane County has or will experience intimate partner violence at some point in their lifetime. I think it's also really important to recognize that less than 1/4 of domestic violence is ever reported to law enforcement. I think oftentimes people think of law enforcement as the primary response to domestic violence. However, it's really less than 1/4, and what that means is that other 75% of folks who are experiencing domestic violence are relying on friends and family members, their informal networks of support, as well as community-based organizations like DAIS, the Rape Crisis Center, Unidos Against Domestic Violence, and Freedom, Inc., as well as others. So we are all part of that really critical safety net for victims and survivors in Dane County. This is an overview of DAIS services. We have a 24-hour helpline, case management services, legal advocacy services. They are not attorneys. They do not provide legal advice, but they are advocates and victim service representatives under state statute who can attend court hearings with victims and survivors. We have a parent, child, and youth services program. We also do prevention programming, which takes a wide variety of forms, but probably the thing that people know us most for is our men's clubs, men encouraging nonviolent strength clubs in area high schools, middle schools, and community centers. We do a lot of training and community education, training of other professionals such as law enforcement or HR professionals, medical professionals on how to identify domestic violence and make appropriate referrals. And we do a lot of systems advocacy, meaning that we work within various systems to try to encourage them to support victims and survivors and how to do that effectively. And finally, we operate the only domestic violence and homicide prevention shelter in Dane County. So unexpected challenges, we all had them. And certainly DAIS was no exception. 2020 began on a very difficult note for our organization with the end of a 42-year relationship with a long-term funder, and that equated to a loss of approximately $250,000 in annual revenue for our shelter program. And then a few short weeks later, things got only more challenging with the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced us to send our wonderful volunteers home, cancel all of our annual events, and then change the way that our staff worked with our clients and with one another. As the pandemic persisted and continued, and continues to do so, unfortunately, here we are, almost 3 years later, we have continued to adapt our programs and our protocols to continue serving our clients in and out of shelter in ways that are effective and safe for our clients and our staff members. It was during this really challenging time that DAIS followed the lead of some of the most resilient, strongest, and creative people that we know, and that's our clients. So, the impact of COVID-19 on domestic violence victims, what we expected versus what actually happened, right? So between 2008 and 2009, with the last large economic recession, DAIS experienced a 109% increase in the number of people reaching out to us for shelter services. We expected that might happen with COVID-19, knowing that there was both a pandemic as well as the economic results of that pandemic, which were putting a lot of families and individuals in precarious situations. However, what we experienced was actually different. Many of the victims of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, were isolated at home with their batterers, and they were unable to call for help. In normal times, the call volumes to our helpline are the highest during the work week and during the work day, when victims and batterers are separated from one another, when somebody's at work, either the victim is or the batterer is. However, with the Safer at Home order, the calls to our helpline plummeted as starting in March of 2020. Children were also at home doing homeschooling. People were trying to work from home. There was a lack of access to resources and a lot of income insecurity because of the pandemic. And all of that resulted in increased violence within families, not just intimate partner violence, but child abuse and neglect and sexual assault as well. So the decrease in calls that we experienced was not just on our helpline. Our law enforcement partners were also seeing a decrease in calls from domestic violence victims, and that was mirrored in the statistics that we had from our LEAP, Law Enforcement Partnership program that we have with Madison Police Department, where we receive referrals directly from law enforcement, and those numbers also went down. Like other social concerns, COVID highlighted the challenges of domestic violence and the inequities that exist in our community. One of the things I think is really notable is that though the community may have seen increases in violence in other ways, for example, community-based violence, domestic violence rates were also going up. They just weren't being reported because victims were at home trapped with their batterers. So domestic violence, which is already an incredibly hidden issue, became even more hidden because of the pandemic. We had to really adjust our strategies to do outreach. So you'll note on your screen there the flyers that we put up. Normally we do flyers like in restaurant bathrooms or in medical clinics, but we had to adjust. And so we put them in grocery stores, we put them in drive-through windows. We created a PSA with our incredible friends at Studio 88, which aired on local stations so that people who were watching TV could hear about us. We did a lot more social media and outreach of that nature. We even did them at pet salons, I think, because those were still open, even during the Safer at Home order. So here's our helpline trend. So this is 2020, and you can see that in March we started to see a decrease in calls to our helpline. That changed right around May, Memorial Day weekend of 2020, when things started opening up. And we have seen that continue. So helpline calls have increased significantly, and specifically from first-time callers. There was almost a 100% increase in the first 3 quarters of 2021 compared to the first 3 quarters of 2020. And July of 2021, we had the highest number of first-time callers ever to our helpline in our 45-year history. A lot of the calls that we're receiving are certainly about increased violence within their homes, but we're also getting calls from folks who the domestic violence may have happened years ago, but because of the pandemic, it is triggering things like post-traumatic stress disorder and things of that nature. And people are really, really struggling. So what did we do? How did we adapt? The one thing I will say about DAIS, I can say a million things about DAIS, but you can't be here all day, is that we have an incredible staff team. And what I appreciate the most is that we are used to crisis. That's what we do. We thrive in crisis, and the pandemic was absolutely no exception to that. So pretty quickly, we launched to remote work like many others in our community. Obviously, not everyone could, but a lot of staff did. So the helpline, as I mentioned, I talked about the helpline earlier, that is the gateway through which clients gain access to all DAIS services. And the helpline advocates are there to help provide clients with information, support, and safety planning. As the pandemic hit, we had to excuse all of the volunteer advocates that work on that helpline because of the pandemic. And so to adapt, staff from all departments across the organization were deployed to assist with the helpline. We purchased phones for staff so that helpline could be answered remotely, ensuring that the helpline continued to be available 24/7. So staff were answering the helpline from their homes in the middle of the night with these phones and the technology that DAIS purchased. case managers also worked remotely for as much as possible in the first part of the pandemic, continuing to provide comprehensive trauma-informed services. And as new safety strategies were implemented at our building, they started coming back into the office to really work with that highly traumatized population that really needs that face-to-face connection. I will say that, again, DAIS does crisis intervention work, and people calling our helpline are sharing, or working with any of our advocates, are sharing really difficult and traumatic things. As I mentioned, our shelter is a homicide prevention strategy, so people are calling and telling us about things that most of us can't even conceive of. And to do that in your home is really difficult. When you're doing that 40 hours a week in an office, but then you have that separation and are able to go home, that's one thing. But staff were answering these calls, and the trauma of the violence that people were experiencing and they were sharing with them was infiltrating their homes. And so a lot of our staff started dealing with some secondary trauma symptoms because of this work. So they are truly heroes in what they were doing. It was also really difficult for staff because they were also working with kids trying to homeschool at home, as well as partners trying to work at home, and being able to find confidential spaces within their homes in order to do this highly confidential work. But again, they are rock stars. And here they are. Here's a lot of them. Not all of them. So approximately half of our staff started just before or during the pandemic, which created new challenges for partnership building and relationship building across departments. There were also amazing new opportunities for new ways of working and collaborating, not just with departments internally, but with other providers. We capitalized on our strength as crisis service providers and leveraged those to create new relationships. Overall, we also have a younger cohort of staff who are very used to operating in a virtual world, and so a lot of them were really thriving. So one example of a new opportunity, in the past, our legal advocates weren't necessarily able to attend judges' meetings. Because of everything moving to a virtual world, they were able to attend those meetings and have deeper relationship building with the judges. Another example is a cohort of crisis-based agencies, DAIS, the Rainbow Project, Focused Interruption Coalition, and Rape Crisis Center, with the help of UW Health, were able to start meeting on a weekly basis to collaborate and to share with one another some of the strategies that we were all finding to be helpful as we were navigating this new world. On-site work. So we are essential services. So we did have to operate the only program that we have put on hold is our support group program. But essential services, so many of our staff, particularly our shelter and security staff, still had to come into the building to provide services. So DAIS was able to implement hazard pay for most of 2020 and the first half of 2021, thanks to our PPP loan. And that was really critical, I think, for our staff to feel valued as they were taking on this high-risk environment. We also added a lot of safety measures within the walls of our building, again, using PPP loan money to increase personal protective equipment. PPP and PPE is very confusing for me, so that we could continue to do those face-to-face services. We also added a lot of technology. Many of our clients did not have access to technology at home. So for example, even though court hearings went remote, our clients were not able to participate. So DAIS added some technology so that our clients could come into our building and participate in their injunction hearings with a legal advocate right by their side, as well as other meetings that they might have to attend with their case managers. So our on-site work, our parent, child, and youth services, we were not able to serve children from the community in the same way, but we really focused a lot on serving the children and families in our shelter. I think it's important to acknowledge that more than half of our shelter residents every year are children, and most of them are under the age of 6. So about 57% of our residents every year are children, and the vast majority of them are under the age of 6. So we did a lot of work. Our parent, child, and youth services team did an astounding amount of work to really ensure that children could do virtual schooling. They also worked to provide structure and schedules for kids who were homeschooling from the shelter, such as lunchtime activities and recess, which is socially distanced, of course, as well as individualized family work. They did a lot of work with families on parent-child bonding activities, did children's activities for sibling groups. They created activity kits for the kids to use in their bedrooms. and they provided a lot of support for parents who are navigating remote work. I think they also did a lot of really meaningful work to assist children and parents in discussing the traumas that they were experiencing and helping them begin the healing process. One of my favorite examples of this is a family that we worked with, a mom and her preteen daughter who were staying in our shelter. They had a very difficult relationship, and the advocates came together and provided them with an opportunity to do a collage activity together. At the end of the activity, when the advocates were debriefing it with them, they asked, what was the most meaningful part of this? And the little girl, the 12-year-old, said, just being with my mom and doing something where we could work together. And so I think about that and that opportunity and that the pandemic created for us to do more of those parent-child bonding activities, because we're not in a child's life for very long. We're only there for a brief period of time, so we want to nurture that relationship. And then we also continue to work with families to refer them to longer-term healing support, such as what is offered by our very close partners at the Rainbow Project, as well as others. Legal advocacy service, as I mentioned, that hearings continue to happen remotely, so the legal advocates were also there the whole time on site working with people and helping them navigate the legal system, whether it was injunction hearings or family court, as well as working with people on immigration and some criminal court. One of the things that I think was really beneficial about the pandemic was a lot of times, like in an injunction hearing, for example, to get a restraining order, victims have to sit just a few feet away from the person that they are filing the restraining order against. Going to a virtual world, they could participate in these court hearings remotely, and that gave them an increased sense of safety where they didn't have to feel terrorized by going to the courthouse and seeing their batterers. So I want to give a big shout out to our legal advocacy team. That was the program where we saw the biggest increase in the services provided during the pandemic. And then finally, on-site work. As I mentioned, we are the only domestic violence and homicide prevention shelter in Dane County. We added a lot of increased safety measures within our shelter program, such as daily health screenings, social distancing, asking people, families ate in the kitchen in shifts. We did deep sanitizing between every family. We offered socially distanced support groups for the adults in our great room of our shelter. We utilized hotel money a lot more frequently as a first point of entry for those who might have been exposed to COVID prior to bringing them into the shelter in order to reduce risk to other families who were there. I will say that the silver lining of a reduced census due to a loss of funding at the beginning of 2020 meant that we had more space to space people out. So, we had to reduce our census because of that elimination of that funding, but that did give us the opportunity to provide more space for families in the shelter and to minimize contact. Prevention, outreach, and education. This changed too. We did a lot more of our work virtually, which opened up a lot of opportunities to grow our audience base and give us access to broader audience base. Zoe, who you can see there, Zoe Heitzinger, who's our prevention and outreach coordinator, and she's an amazing young woman. She is like the Zoom queen now and can do almost anything on Zoom and has done an exceptional job of continuing that reach. We also continued our prevention groups in high schools, middle schools, and community centers, first in a virtual world and then in person and socially distanced as it became safe to do so. And we did a lot more expanded outreach in spaces to reach people who might have needed information that we hadn't thought of before. One of the most interesting things that happened with the pandemic was we all had DAIS masks made for our board and volunteers and staff. I'm sure all of your companies have them too. But that ended up becoming an outreach strategy for us. As people were wearing them out in the world, it gave other people in the world who might need services or need support, have questions, a person that was easily identifiable to talk to. It also gave us an opportunity to connect with people that we might not have connected with again. For example, right at the beginning of the pandemic, I took my daughter, who's obsessed with Culver's, to Culver's drive-thru, and I was wearing my DAIS mask, and the young woman who brought my food out said, "Oh my gosh, do you work there?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "Oh, I stayed in the shelter 3 years ago, and is so-and-so still there? Is so-and-so still there?" She was my case manager, and it was so amazing. You changed our lives, you saved our lives. And she said, "Please tell them that me and the babies are safe. I've got a good job, I've got an apartment." And it was like so amazing because we don't get to have those experiences very often. So that was another kind of unexpected outcome of our masks. So going forward, discovering new opportunities and how we do our work. We have had the great opportunity because of COVID to engage with international trainers, the people that we would never have been able to afford to bring here to Madison. So for example, we're working with the Thoughtful Workplace out of Vancouver, British Columbia, with our staff on a whole series of anti-racism, how to become a more anti-racist organization. They are continuing to work with our race and equity work group. That was an incredible series. It was all done virtually, but the staff really appreciated that, and particularly our BIPOC staff, who felt like it gave them some opportunities to connect with people outside of Madison and Dane County, people outside of their own community that they may already know, but also to hear from national trainers and to feel validated and supported by folks from across the world. We also did a lot more virtual training and education, as I mentioned. For example, one of our staff members who identifies as an Indigenous woman did an amazing training on serving victims in the Indigenous community and the historical trauma that Indigenous people experience, and was able to record that, do that virtually for our staff and record it so that we have that in perpetuity and are starting to share it with some of our other partners. We've had more opportunities to connect with, learn from, and provide technical assistance to other domestic violence programs, both across the state and nationally. An example I'll give of that is I have now consulted with 13 different programs from 7 different states on how to do purpose-built domestic violence shelters and facility planning, as well as capital campaigns. That's an opportunity that would never have happened in the past. We are also launching a texting helpline this year. That was something that was, critically, would have been really helpful during the beginning of the pandemic, and was something that we are bringing back. So stay tuned for more information about that. We had much more presence in various communities committees and work groups as due to the virtual spaces, made it a lot easier to participate. And then we had new ways of using our existing space. So we have a big building, and parts of that building aren't being used right now. So we are partnering with some computer engineering folks, volunteers from UW-Madison, who are coming in and doing tech safety clinics for our clients. So our clients can bring in devices like their smartphones or iPads or whatever. If they feel like their battery may have put spyware on it, they can bring it into our tech clinic and have it scanned and do some safety planning around that. That's an opportunity that we wouldn't have had before because our space was being so utilized, but now we can bring in community partners more. We also have more opportunities to do systems advocacy work, as I mentioned, attending the judges' meetings, as well as one-on-one meetings with the judges. And then the future. So we are finishing up our strategic planning right now. We put it on hold for a year, and I'm glad we did, because I think that the pandemic gave us a lot more information that we wouldn't have had before, and gave us an opportunity to really think about what services is core to who DAIS is. I think that isolation, as I mentioned, of victims is omnipresent with the pandemic, and has really forced us to think about partnerships differently that we might not have considered before. For example, training other various groups that we may not have prioritized before to make every door an open door, like hairstylists, or folks like that, things that were still open during that time, where if they had been able to be equipped with that language of how to talk to someone, how to make a referral, how to approach someone. And then, as I mentioned, narrowing our focus as an organization. I think what COVID highlighted for all of us across the community were the many, many needs that our community has. And we have come to realize at DAIS that we can't effectively be all things to all people. We need to focus on our core strengths, which is crisis intervention and a response to victims of intimate partner violence, which is confidently urgent, as well as really focusing on the expertise that we have to do more outreach, education, and training on what we are expert at, so that we can help infuse the language of domestic violence and intimate partner violence to all places where victims and survivors may seek help. Again, assuring that every door is an open door. And then thinking about other opportunities for our systems advocacy moving forward. Again, as I mentioned, advocating for victims to participate in court hearings virtually, even as the courthouse continues to open, and finding ways to support victims and encourage systems to really consider their safety. Continuing to reopen plans. So we talk about our opening plans at DAIS as an accordion because we have to open a little bit, then we have to close a little bit, and then we open. So we monitor things on a daily basis. We had hoped to launch support groups again starting in 2022. That's still on hold. And I think, again, one of the things I'm most proud of is how incredibly adaptable and resilient our staff is and how they continue to navigate this work. Because every day is a new unknown. So that's how we're kind of operating. We're moving forward day by day and continuing to keep safety of everybody we serve, as well as those who do the work, as paramount in our decision making. And then finally, we could absolutely not do this without our community. Nothing that we have accomplished over the past two plus years would have been possible without our believers and our champions. We had to cancel our events due to COVID-19. Our client needs became much more complex, and DAIS was really pushed to our limit. But because of the generosity of our community and the creativity of our staff, we were able to keep moving forward. And we were so fortunate to have Jim and Katie Buttman, who are our community champions for 2020, agree to stay on as our community champions in 2021 after some of our plans were foiled. They've been some of our biggest and most vocal supporters over the past 2 years, and they have rallied many others to the charge to ensure that these essential and critical services have remained strong. We are so grateful to them and to all of our many loyal guardian angels and champions who not only helped us build the new DAIS in 2014, but who have stuck with us through thick and thin because they all believe that victims and survivors of intimate partner violence deserve to have a community who truly supports them and values them at their darkest moments so they can not just survive, but thrive. The End by Shannon Barry. Thank you all. And I don't know if we have any questions.
We do.
We do.
Thank you so
Great.
much, Shannon. We
Yes,
have
ma'am.
lots of questions,
Oh, boy.
actually.
Oh.
First, can you explain some of the types of backgrounds that most of your staff have?
Great question. We come from a wide variety of backgrounds. So I have a master's degree in social work, but I have a BA degree in aquatic biology. So we have a lot of folks who come to us with criminal justice certificates, human services certificates, some folks who are gender and women's studies, some folks who are considering going back to law school, all sorts of people. People with psych degrees. We don't require degrees for our programs. For most of our positions, it's really seeking people who have a deep passion for the work. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a potpourri.
It does. Thank you. Next question. How did you adapt your fundraising and outreach to replace traditional events?
It's also a great question. Well, we have an amazing director of development, Mary Donahue, who's a fellow Rotarian. And she and her team were so adaptable. And so we did have to cancel our events, and we launched Operation Resilience, which was really, again, one of the things that I think we've all really appreciated is taking a cue from the people that we serve, that they are super resilient. They are some of the strongest people I've ever met in my life. And we're like, let's follow their lead. And so she launched an Operation Resilience campaign. The Buttmans were incredibly instrumental in that. And so we just continue to be as creative as possible. And she's a very creative person.
All right. How do you reach your non-English speaking victims?
Great question.
Or clients.
Clients, yes, absolutely. Great question. So we have bilingual Spanish and English speaking staff positions in every program at DAIS. We also have staff who are fluent in American Sign Language. So our Crisis Intervention and Case Management Services Manager is deaf and fluent in ASL. We try to recruit. We're always recruiting and trying to think about how to best serve our community. When we don't have an advocate or a staff member available who speaks that language, then we use Certified Languages International. But really it is our focus to try to ensure that we have advocates in every program who are at least bilingual in Spanish and English. I'm also really proud because we've had so many amazing staff who have gone on to be executive directors at other nonprofits. And most recently, our legal advocacy program manager, Virginia, who was with DAIS for 7 years, recently took over as the new executive director of Unidos Against Domestic Violence. We've always had a strong partnership with Unidos, but it's really thrilling to be able to partner with them at a deeper level to do co-advocacy.
Yeah, I'm going to combine a few questions into one. So in your discovery, or did you have a discovery of any silver linings during the pandemic? And what were some of the best ways that you used to evaluate all that you were doing during this time?
Ooh, wow. So many silver linings. I think, again, I think we all realized, and we knew this, but we all realized how adaptable we are, right? I mean, we're a crisis-based organization, and everybody pitched in. I think that staff morale, ironically, is probably at the highest it's probably been in a long time, because nobody at DAIS has an ego. I don't know how to say it. You ask, what qualifies people to work at DAIS? Humility. Everybody jumped in and did what needed to be done, and I think that it really created an incredibly hard times really create deep, meaningful bonding, right, of a team. We were all in the trenches together and have been in the trenches together. So that was a silver lining. What was the second part of the question?
And what measures or how do you evaluate all that you've been doing during the pandemic?
Sure. We've been evaluating. I mean, we are continuing to we do evaluation on a constant basis, both formally and informally with, client exit surveys and evaluations, but also qualitative evaluations as, for example, the young girl that I gave you the example of. One of the other things that I was really also very proud of was with our strategic planning the past year, we reached out to community partners, funders, donors, staff, and we had over 109 people provide information who were really engaged in the process and provided information. And to me, that's also a data point, right? That people care about this issue, that there's so many people in this community who really feel strongly that these services are vital. So that's a data point. But we also look at staff satisfaction. Kathy Bailey is our director of administration, brought this amazing concept with her. We do stay interviews with our staff to find out what keeps them staying at DAIS, what keeps them motivated. Our board engagement has been incredibly high. So we look at all of those kinds of different engagement pieces, staff satisfaction, and then obviously client satisfaction with the services that they're receiving is paramount. For example, our legal advocacy program, 99% of the clients who use that program report that it provided the information and support that they were seeking and that they feel more empowered in the court system. All of our metrics like that are always over 90%. So proud of my team.
All right, and the last question.
Yes, ma'am.
How long do your clients get to stay at this shelter, and how long are you able to support them?
Sure, that's a great question. So we don't really have a set length of stay. 45 days is our typical length of stay, and that's what we have been guided by. With the pandemic, it was very clear that that was not sufficient. I'm sure you all know this, but there is a deep lack of affordable housing in Dane County. We were very fortunate. We just received notification that we will be receiving funding from the Department of Children and Families at the state to pilot a Housing First program for domestic violence victims for the next 3 years. So we're excited to get started on that. But people typically stay with us for 45 days, but we look at their length of stay based on individual needs and what people are achieving and how they're moving forward. That said, our shelter capacity is limited, and so we often have a wait list for shelter. We prioritize those for shelter who are in the most lethal situations. So we use a national lethality index. The women, men, and children in our shelter are all at risk of being murdered by their batterers. That doesn't mean that other victims and survivors aren't needing services, which is why we do case management services regardless of where somebody's staying. It could be pre-shelter, it could be during shelter, it could be post-shelter. So there's really, it's very individualized, it's very client-focused on what each client's needs are. Hopefully that answered the question. So I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here, I appreciate it, and stay safe out there. I have to say that because it's my job. I think safety is the most important thing.
All right, Rotarians, let's give Shannon a well round of applause for a great presentation. Thank you again for speaking to us today, Shannon. It was another wonderful Rotary presentation. And thanks to everyone who's attended today's meeting. We will see you again virtually next week. Rotarians, we are adjourned.